My name is Ryan Miller, and if you told me 3 years ago that I'd end up being arrested in my own living room because of a lie my wife told, I would have laughed in your face. I was the kind of man who believed in honesty, in loyalty, in working hard and building a good life. I never thought betrayal could come from someone I'd once planned to grow old with. Back then, I was running a small but successful construction business. I had 10 employees, a nice house I'd built myself, and a solid reputation in town. I wasn't rich, but I was comfortable. Life was stable. Then Lena came into the picture. Beautiful, funny, full of energy. She worked at a local marketing agency, and we met when I was hired to remodel her company's office. From the start, she made me feel seen. She'd come by every day with coffee and jokes, always smiling, always interested in my work. I'd been single for years after a bad breakup, so her attention hit me harder than I expected. Within months, we were inseparable. She'd call me my rock, and I'd tell her she was my peace. It felt real. A year into dating, she started talking about our future. Marriage, kids, the dream house. I wasn't in a rush, but I knew she wanted more. Then, one night after dinner, she said the words that would change my life. "Ryan, I'm pregnant." I remember sitting there, staring at her, my fork halfway to my mouth. She smiled nervously, eyes wide, waiting for my reaction. I was shocked, sure, but part of me was also happy. I wasn't planning on kids yet, but I loved her. So I did what I thought a man should do. I took responsibility. I got down on one knee that same night and asked her to marry me. She cried, said yes, and threw her arms around me. It felt right. I didn't ask questions. I didn't think to check anything. She said she was pregnant. I believed her. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of wedding plans and baby talk. She told me she didn't want a big ceremony, just something intimate. I agreed. We got married at the courthouse with a few friends. She moved into my house full-time, and for a little while, everything felt perfect. But then things started to shift. She stopped going to her doctor appointments, claiming she wanted to keep the pregnancy natural. When I offered to go with her, she always had an excuse. The timing was off, the clinic rescheduled, she wasn't feeling well. I brushed it off at first, thinking she just wanted privacy. But then a few months later, I noticed she didn't look pregnant at all. No weight gain, no morning sickness, no changes. When I gently brought it up, she got defensive. "Are you saying I'm lying? You think I'd joke about something like that?" I backed off immediately. I didn't want to upset her. I told myself everyone's pregnancy looked different. But deep down, something didn't sit right. Around that same time, she started pushing me to sign over parts of my business. She said it would protect our family financially and make it easier to manage taxes once the baby came. I didn't know much about legal stuff, but she worked in marketing and had friends in finance. I trusted her judgment. So I signed some documents. I didn't realize then that I was slowly handing her control over everything I owned. A month later,
He told me she'd had a miscarriage. She cried for hours. I held her, trying to comfort her, telling her it wasn't her fault. But she wouldn't let me see the medical reports, said she didn't want to talk about it. I respected that. I thought she was grieving. What I didn't know was that there had never been a pregnancy at all. The night everything fell apart was quiet. Too quiet. I came home from work and found her sitting on the couch, staring at the TV, her eyes red. "What's wrong?" I asked. She looked up at me, trembling. "You hit me," she said softly. "What?" I froze. "You grabbed me and hit me," she said again, louder this time, tears rolling down her face. "You hurt me, Ryan." My mind went blank. I had no idea what she was talking about. "Lena, I never touched you." She shook her head, sobbing harder. "You did. You're just like my ex. I can't live like this." Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door, loud, forceful. 2 police officers stepped in. "Ryan Miller?" one of them said. "Yeah," I stammered. "You're under arrest for domestic assault." I stood there, completely stunned as they handcuffed me in my own home. while Lena cried on the couch, her face buried in her hands. The officers led me outside while the neighbors watched. I tried to speak, to explain, but it didn't matter. Her bruises, fake or not, told a story they believed. At the station, they showed me photos, marks on her arm, a bruise near her collarbone. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. She'd actually hurt herself. I spent 2 nights in a holding cell before my lawyer got me out. The restraining order came next. I couldn't go near my house, couldn't contact her, couldn't even get my things. When I tried to check my bank accounts, half the money was gone. That's when the realization hit me like a truck. She had planned everything. The fake pregnancy, the business documents, the emotional manipulation. It had all been part of her setup. She wanted the house, the assets, the company, and I had given her the perfect opportunity. My lawyer warned me that fighting back could make things worse unless I had proof. But what proof could I possibly have? Then I remembered something. A few weeks before all this happened, I'd installed a hidden camera in the living room, not to spy on her, but because we'd had a small break-in scare. I had completely forgotten about it. The footage automatically backed up to my laptop. When I finally got access to it, what I saw made my blood run cold. There she was, Lena, standing in front of the mirror with makeup and a bottle of something in her hand. She hit her own arm against the corner of the table, over and over, until it bruised. Then she sat on the couch and began to cry. Seconds later, she picked up her phone and called the police. I just sat there staring at the screen, numb. It was all right there, proof that she had framed me. And in that moment, something inside me broke. The man who once believed in love, loyalty, and trust died quietly in that chair. The man who replaced him had only one goal, to make her pay. Not with anger, not with violence, but with truth. And the truth was going to destroy her the way she tried to destroy me. That night, I opened a new folder on my laptop and titled it Justice, because this wasn't over, not even close.
The morning after I discovered that video, I didn't sleep. I just sat in my small rented apartment, staring at the laptop screen, replaying the footage over and over again. Every time I watched Lena hit herself, it felt like another piece of my soul crumbled away. I wasn't even angry at first. I was stunned. How could someone I loved plan something that cold, that evil? By sunrise, the shock had turned to something sharper. Focus. I wasn't going to let her ruin me. She'd already taken my home, my business, and my reputation. But now I had something she didn't know about. Proof. And I was going to use it. I called my lawyer first. His name was David, and he was one of the few people who still believed I was innocent. He answered on the second ring, sounding half asleep. "Ryan? What's wrong?" "I found something," I said, my voice shaking. "Video footage. It shows Lena hurting herself. She framed me, David." There was a pause on the other end. "You're serious?" "Dead serious. It's all on camera." "Don't send it anywhere yet," he said quickly. "Bring it to me, today. We'll make copies and go through the right channels. If that video's real, we can turn this case around." That was the first flicker of hope I'd felt in months. I drove to his office with my laptop like it was the most valuable thing I owned, because at that moment, it was. David and I watched the footage together. His jaw clenched as the video played. When it ended, he leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. "This is gold," he said. "If this gets into court, her entire story collapses. But we need to handle this carefully. She'll deny it, maybe even try to say you faked it." "I know," I said. "So what do we do?" "We collect more," he said. "If she's that manipulative, she's made other mistakes. Emails, messages, calls. We find everything." And that became my mission. Over the next few weeks, I worked like a detective. I started going through old emails, phone backups, and cloud data. I found inconsistencies, dates that didn't match, messages that contradicted her story. In one email, she mentioned meeting a friend the same day she supposedly had a miscarriage. When I cross-referenced it with the investigator I'd hired later, that friend turned out to be her lawyer. She'd been plotting this months, maybe even before she claimed to be pregnant. But the more I dug, the more disturbing it became. I found a draft email she'd forgotten to delete. It was to a real estate agent asking about transferring property ownership in the event of domestic separation. The date? 2 months before she accused me. She had planned to destroy me long before she ever called the police. I brought everything to David. He told me to stay calm, stay quiet, and keep collecting. If she thinks she's won, she'll get sloppy. And he was right. A few weeks later, I got an unexpected call from my business accountant, Mark. "Ryan, I don't know if this matters, but Lena's been trying to move funds from your old company account. She said she has authorization, but the paperwork looks strange." My pulse quickened. "Can you send me what she sent you?" "Already did, but be careful, man. She's connected. You make a wrong move, and she'll turn it around on you again." I opened the email, and sure enough, there it was. Fake authorization papers with my signature forged at the bottom. Not a perfect copy, but close enough that someone who didn't know better might buy it. I sat there for a long moment, then smiled for the first time in months. Because now I had not just one piece of evidence, but several. I forwarded everything to David. He spent the next few days compiling a case file so airtight that even her lawyers would choke on it. Meanwhile, I started rebuilding my life in small ways. I took contract jobs, stayed quiet, and waited. But Lena wasn't done. One night, while I was working late at a site, I got a text from an unknown number. "You think you can win? I'll destroy what's left of you." No name, but I knew who it was. That text didn't scare me. It confirmed something. She was nervous. David filed a motion with the court to reopen the case based on new evidence. When Lena's lawyers heard that, they panicked. They tried to dismiss it, claiming it was harassment. But once the footage was shown privately to the judge, everything changed. A hearing was scheduled. The day of the hearing, I walked into the courtroom with my heart pounding. Lena sat across the room, perfectly dressed, fake tears already forming in her eyes. Her lawyer whispered to her, confident, smug. Then David stood up and said, "Your Honor, before we proceed, we'd like to submit video evidence previously undisclosed recorded by a security device in the defendant's home." Lena froze. The judge watched the footage silently. When it ended, the entire room was still. You could hear the sound of the air conditioning humming. Then the judge looked at her and said, "Mrs. Miller, do you have an explanation for this?" Her face went pale. She tried to speak but couldn't form words. Her lawyer stammered something about misunderstanding, but it was over. The restraining order was lifted, the charges were dropped. And suddenly, the woman who had ruined my life was the one being investigated for fraud, perjury, and filing a false police report. But I wasn't done yet. David turned to me outside the courtroom and said, "You want to press civil charges?" I hesitated. For months, I dreamed of revenge. I wanted her to feel every ounce of pain she'd caused me. But now that I saw her face, pale and shaking, I didn't feel triumph. I felt empty. Still, I nodded. Yeah, she deserves to face consequences. Over the next few months, the case built momentum. Lena lost her job when the story hit the local news. Her agency dropped her instantly, terrified of the bad publicity. Her friends distanced themselves. People finally saw her for what she was. I started getting messages from people who doubted me before. Apologies, sympathy, even job offers. It didn't erase what I went through, but it helped. Then one night, while going through the last batch of documents for the case, I found something that made me stop cold. A transfer slip from one of my old accounts. Not in Lena's name, but someone else's. Someone named Ethan Blake. I didn't recognize the name, but the memo line said, "Project Bonus, approved by Lena." When I looked closer, I realized Ethan Blake was one of my old subcontractors, a guy I'd fired for stealing equipment. And suddenly, everything clicked. Lena hadn't worked alone. The betrayal ran deeper than I thought. And if she thought I was done with her, she had no idea what was coming next. I didn't sleep the night I found the name Ethan Blake. It kept spinning in my mind like a puzzle I couldn't stop trying to solve. I opened old records, payroll logs, emails, anything I could find that had his name on it. Ethan had worked for me about 3 years earlier on one of my biggest renovation contracts. I fired him after catching him overcharging clients and pocketing the difference. I hadn't thought about him since. So why was his name showing up on a recent transaction tied to my ex-wife? I called David the next morning. "I think Lena had help," I said. "His name's Ethan Blake." He sighed. "Help with what exactly?" "Everything," I said. "The money, the forged papers, maybe even the fake abuse report. I think this guy helped her set me up." David paused, then said, "If that's true, we need proof. Not just speculation." "I'll get it," I said, and hung up. That's when I went full detective. I started with public records. Ethan had started his own contracting business shortly after I fired him, but it hadn't lasted. Bankruptcy, lawsuits, unpaid taxes. The guy was a walking disaster. But then, about 1.5 years ago, right around when Lena's attitude toward me started changing, his financial record improved dramatically. Suddenly, he had cash. He bought a new truck, paid off a credit card balance of over 30 grand. Someone had given him money. I checked my old company's financial database, the one I thought Lena couldn't access after she locked me out. But I'd kept a local backup on an old hard drive. There was a $40,000 consulting fee paid to E. Blake Construction, a payment I had no recollection of authorizing. The signature looked like mine, but it wasn't. I stared at the screen for a long time, the reality sinking in. Lena and Ethan had been working together from the start. It explained too much, the way she'd suddenly started doubting me, accusing me of things that didn't make sense. The mysterious texts I used to get from numbers I didn't recognize, trying to lure me into arguments. The night she claimed I threw a vase at her when I wasn't even home. Ethan had access to my house back then. He'd done repair work there once. He could have staged anything. But I wasn't going to accuse without proof. Not again. So I decided to bait them. I created a new email address using a fake name and sent Ethan a message pretending to be a contractor with a big project in town. I said I'd heard about his connections and wanted to work something off the record. I figured if he was the kind of guy who helped Lena set me up, he wouldn't mind bending the law for profit again. He replied within an hour. His message was short and confident. "Let's talk. Meet me Friday, same coffee place by the river, 3 p.m. Same coffee place. That told me all I needed to know. He thought I was someone from his circle, someone who already knew his routine. I showed the email to David. If I can record the meeting, we might get him to say something. David hesitated. "That's risky, Ryan. You can't entrap him. But if he says something on his own, and you just happen to record it, that's different." That Friday, I drove to the coffee shop early. I sat in a corner booth, hidden behind a newspaper, and a small voice recorder clipped inside my jacket. When Ethan walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. He looked cleaner, more polished than the scruffy guy I'd fired years ago. He ordered a drink, sat down, and started looking around. When he didn't see anyone, he pulled out his phone and made a call. "Yeah, no show. Tell her it's fine. We'll try again next week." Her. That word hit me like an electric jolt. I waited until he left, then followed him outside to see what car he got into. Black SUV. I noted the license plate and texted it to David immediately. By that evening, David had already pulled records. The vehicle was registered to Lena's company. That was the proof we needed. We filed a subpoena to pull Ethan's bank records, and once those came in, everything started connecting. Payments from Lena's accounts, shared credit card expenses, even 2 airline tickets booked in their names to Miami, the week after she filed the false abuse report against me. It was all right there. David called me into his office. "Ryan, this is explosive. We can nail them both. Fraud, defamation, conspiracy to falsify evidence." "Do it," I said without hesitation. But it wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about clearing my name fully, about showing everyone who I really was and what she had done. Over the next month, the case gained traction. The police opened an investigation into Lena and Ethan. When they were finally called in for questioning, Lena's confidence cracked. She denied knowing Ethan beyond some contractor work. But when confronted with photos of them together at a hotel, she broke down. She tried to flip it, said Ethan blackmailed her, said he threatened her into helping him frame me. But Ethan told a different story. He confessed everything. He said Lena came to him after I fired him, angry and desperate for revenge. She told him she wanted to teach me a lesson, to make sure I never controlled anything again. He helped her forge documents and create fake injuries. In exchange, she promised him money from the settlement she expected after the divorce. It was all premeditated. When David told me the confession, I didn't feel happy. I didn't even feel angry. I just felt exhausted. Months of fear, humiliation, and loneliness had finally led to this. I'd lost so much. My house, my business, my peace. But at least now the truth was out there. The DA decided to charge both Lena and Ethan with multiple counts, including fraud, perjury, and conspiracy. Their bail was set high. The same system that once looked at me like a monster was now turning its eyes toward them. But even after all of that, I couldn't stop thinking about one question. Why? Why did she hate me enough to destroy me? When I asked David, he said, "Some people don't hate you because of what you did. They hate you because you walked away from the version of them they needed you to believe in." It made sense. Lena needed control. She couldn't stand that I saw through her lies, that I was going to cut her off financially after catching her manipulating invoices in the business. So she struck first. A few months later, I got a letter from the prosecutor's office confirming that all charges against me had been formally expunged. My record was clean. My name was clear. But the story wasn't over yet. Because right when I thought I could finally breathe again, I got another letter. This time from Ethan's lawyer. He wanted to make a deal. He said Ethan had something else, something about Lena's plan that even the prosecutors didn't know yet, something that could change everything. I stared at the letter for a long time before picking up the phone to call David. "Set the meeting," I said. "I want to hear what he has to say." The county jail smelled of cold metal, disinfectant, and regret. I hadn't stepped foot inside a place like that before, and it made my skin crawl. The guard led me down a gray hallway lined with flickering lights until we reached a small room with glass partitions. Ethan Blake sat behind the glass, wearing an orange jumpsuit and a smirk that didn't match the situation he was in. When he saw me, he leaned forward. "Didn't think I'd see you again, boss." "Cut the crap," I said, sitting down. "You wanted to talk, so talk." He studied me for a moment, tapping his fingers against the metal table. "You're not going to like what I have to say. Try me." He sighed, looking almost amused. "You think Lena did this because she hated you, right? Because she wanted money or control?" "That's what it looks like." "Well," he said, lowering his voice, "that's not the full story." He paused, making me wait, then continued. "She didn't just want to ruin you for the money, Ryan. She wanted to ruin you because of your father." My father. The word hit me like a slap. What the hell does my father have to do with any of this? He's been dead for years. Ethan smirked again. "That's what I thought too, until she told me. Turns out your old man wasn't exactly faithful to your mother. Had a little thing going on with a woman named Clara Mason. Ring any bells?" My chest tightened. I hadn't heard that name in years, but I remembered it from old whispers, one of Dad's office assistants, the one who left suddenly after Mom found out something. Ethan nodded when he saw my expression change. Yeah, Clara Mason. That was Lena's mother. My stomach dropped. What? You heard me, Ethan said. Lena's not just some random woman who met you by chance. She's been planning this since before you even knew her name. She grew up watching her mom fall apart after your dad dumped her and went back to your mom. Her mom drank herself to death a few years later, and Lena blamed your family for it. She wanted payback, not just for her mom, but for every rich man who walks away clean. I stared at him through the glass, feeling like my whole body had turned to ice. My father's affair had come back decades later to destroy me. Ethan kept talking. She found out who you were years before you met. That chance meeting at the hardware expo? Not a coincidence. She knew you'd be there because she checked your company's calendar online. The pregnancy lie, the fake abuse report, all of it. She wanted to destroy you the way she thought your father destroyed her mother. I leaned back, trying to breathe. It all made sense now. The speed of her attachment, the manipulative behavior, the obsession with my father's old house, even her fascination with my last name. She used me, Ethan went on. But she didn't tell me all of that until later. By then, I was already in too deep. She promised to pay me off, and I was stupid enough to think she'd keep her word. When she turned on me, I realized I was just another tool in her game. I said nothing for a long time. The weight of what I'd just heard settled like a brick in my chest. My father's sins had become my punishment. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady. Why are you telling me this now? Ethan shrugged. Because she's already trying to make a deal. She's claiming I coerced her, said she was a victim, that I blackmailed her into everything. She's throwing me under the bus, so if I go down, I'm taking her with me. You deserve to know why she did it. I looked at him, trying to decide if he was telling the truth, but the story fit too perfectly with everything I'd seen. She's not done, Ethan said quietly. She's got a backup account, offshore, under her mother's name. If she gets bail, she'll disappear. I clenched my jaw. Where? He smirked again, leaning close to the glass. You want that info? You'll have to make it worth my while. I almost stood up to leave, but then I stopped. You want leverage? Fine. You get me proof, screenshots, account numbers, whatever. I'll talk to my lawyer about reducing your sentence. But if you're lying to me again, I'll make sure you rot in here. He nodded. Deal. I left the jail feeling sick. The story replayed in my mind over and over. My father's affair? Lena's mother? Revenge? Everything that had destroyed my life wasn't just random, it was inherited. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the couch, staring at an old photograph of my parents. My mother was smiling. My father looked proud, confident, the kind of man everyone admired. But I knew now that even he had cracks. His mistakes had poisoned everything that came after. The next morning, David called. You're not going to believe this, he said. Lena's lawyer just filed a motion for bail. She's claiming mental distress and emotional abuse as reasons for her behavior. Of course she is, I muttered. But the DA is opposing it, he said. They want to keep her inside. However, if Ethan gives us something solid, that'll seal the deal. A week later, I got an envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside were several printed screenshots of wire transfers from an offshore account, Cayman Islands, all under the name Clara M. Holdings. One of the transactions was dated just 2 months before she was arrested. Attached was a handwritten note. Told you she'd try to run. Keep your promise. E. I brought the documents straight to David. He handed them to the DA, and within days the bail request was denied. Lena stayed behind bars. When she found out, she finally called me, through her lawyer. Her voice trembled, but not with fear. It was anger. You think this is over, Ryan? You ruined my life. I laughed bitterly. You ruined your own. I just stopped you from ruining mine. You don't understand, she shouted. Your father destroyed my family. You think you get to walk away clean just because you didn't know? I'm not my father, I said quietly. But you made sure I paid for his sins anyway." There was silence on the line. Then she said softly, "That's the point." And the call ended. The trial took months. Ethan testified, turning over every piece of evidence he had. Lena's lies collapsed one by one. The judge called it a deliberate, calculated act of deception with malicious intent. When the verdict was read, I felt no joy, just relief. Lena was sentenced to 7 years in prison. Ethan got 3, with eligibility for parole after 1. After the hearing, I walked out of the courthouse into the sunlight. The world felt quiet again. David walked beside me. "You did it, Ryan. You got your life back." I nodded slowly. "Maybe, but I'm not sure I want it back the same way." He looked curiously. "What do you mean?" "I spent so much time fighting to prove I wasn't who she said I was. Now I need to figure out who I actually am." He smiled faintly. "That's not revenge, Ryan. That's healing." Maybe he was right. But as I drove home, one thought lingered. I might have cleared my name, but the shadow of what happened would always follow me. Still, at least it was over. Or so I thought. Because 2 months later, I got another letter. This one from a law firm I'd never heard of, representing the estate of Clara M. Mason. Inside was a single sentence that made my blood run cold. "Your father owed my client a debt, one that you will now have to answer for."
The letter sat on my kitchen table for 3 days before I opened it again. Every time I glanced at it, a dull ache filled my chest. I had finally started sleeping again, finally started rebuilding my life after months of chaos. And then this, another shadow from my father's past, crawling back to drag me down. The letter came from a law firm called Peterson and Lowell Associates. It stated that, quote, "Per the will and unresolved obligations of the late Richard Stone, I was being summoned to discuss matters concerning the estate of Clara M. Mason," unquote. The same Clara who had been my father's mistress and Lena's mother. It made no sense. My father had been dead for over 10 years. How could there be anything left to resolve? I called David first thing that morning. "I got another letter," I said, my voice tight. "It's from Clara Mason's estate. They're claiming my father owed her something." David exhaled slowly. "Can you send me a copy?" I scanned it over and waited. When he called back, his tone was careful. "Ryan, this isn't about money. It says there's a personal matter that needs acknowledgement. That could mean a trust, a document, or even what?" He hesitated. "Even another child." My stomach twisted. "No, no way." "Ryan," he said softly, "you told me your father's affair with Clara was serious enough that your mom almost left him. Are you absolutely sure there wasn't a child?" I sank into a chair. "If there was, I never knew." "Then it's time to find out," he said. 2 days later, I walked into a small downtown law office. The receptionist led me into a conference room that smelled faintly of lemon polish and old paper. An older attorney entered with a briefcase and a polite smile. "Mr. Stone, thank you for coming. I'm Daniel Peterson, executor of the Mason estate." He set the briefcase down and opened it. Inside was a manila folder filled with documents. "Before she passed, Miss Mason left certain instructions regarding your father. She wanted the truth recorded, and unfortunately, she passed before he could fulfill his part." He slid a document across the table. "This is a notarized letter from your father to Clara, written in 1995. I hesitated, then picked it up. The handwriting was unmistakable, my father's. It read, "Clara, I know what I did can't be undone. I never meant to hurt you or our daughter. I'll take care of her quietly, as we agreed. But please, don't let her grow up hating me. One day I'll explain it myself." I froze. The words blurred as I read them again and again. Our daughter. It was true. Clara had been pregnant when my father ended the affair. He had promised to help, but he kept it secret his entire life. That daughter, his illegitimate child, was Lena. She wasn't just Clara Mason's daughter. She was my half-sister. The realization hit me like a hammer. My breath caught in my throat, and I felt my pulse racing in my ears. Lena wasn't just a woman who wanted revenge for her mother's pain. She was family. Peterson continued talking, oblivious to the shock on my face. It appears your father set up a private trust fund for Miss Mason's child, though it was never fully executed due to his passing. Miss Mason's estate wanted to ensure the truth was known to both families before closing the file. I sat there in silence, gripping
the paper so hard it nearly tore. My father's words felt like ghosts whispering through time. David's voice echoed in my head from weeks earlier. Some people don't hate you because of what you did. They hate you because you walked away from the version of them they needed you to believe in. Now I finally understood. Lena didn't just hate me because of my father's betrayal of her mother. She hated me because I was living the life that should have been hers. The house, the family name, the respect, everything she thought her mother deserved but never got. Her entire plan, every twisted act, every lie. It wasn't just revenge, it was a warped sense of justice for a family secret buried decades ago. Peterson cleared his throat gently. There's one more item you should see. He handed me a small envelope sealed with wax. This was found in Miss Mason's belongings after her passing. It's addressed to you. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a single note, written in elegant cursive. Ryan, if you are reading this, it means the truth is finally out. I didn't mean to hate you. I just couldn't stop seeing your father every time I looked at you. I wish things could have been different. Lena. I sat there motionless. My throat burned. She had written it before her arrest, maybe even before she set the plan in motion. Somewhere deep down, she must have known it was wrong, but she couldn't stop herself. Peterson packed up the rest of the documents quietly. There's nothing else you need to do. The Mason estate is closing. You're free of any legal ties. I nodded numbly and left. The drive home felt endless. The city lights blurred in the rain as I gripped the wheel tighter. My mind replayed everything, every argument, every lie, every tear. When I got home, I walked straight to my father's old study. I hadn't been in there in years. His framed photo still sat on the bookshelf. I picked it up and stared at it for a long time. You did this. You started this. And I finished it. I didn't know if that made me feel better or worse. For the first time in months, I cried. Not for Lena, not for my father, but for everything that got lost between their mistakes and my own need for revenge. Months passed. Life slowly returned to something resembling normal. My business recovered, my reputation restored. People still whispered, but I didn't care anymore. One day I visited a small cemetery on the edge of town. 2 graves stood side by side, Clara Mason, and a few yards away, Lena Mason, the woman who destroyed my life, and the woman who unknowingly set it all in motion. I placed a single white rose on Lena's grave. I forgive you, I said softly, because I finally understand. The wind rustled through the trees. For the first time, I felt the weight of everything begin to lift. Walking away from that place, I realized revenge hadn't saved me. Truth had. And the truth, no matter how painful, was finally enough to set me free.